I'm here once again, just I don't know, just running across a few things that I've tended to run across on the internet here and social media, more notably. It's been a pretty busy week. Been a pretty busy week recently, busy few weeks, and let's see. It looks like I'm getting some spin on a conversation here, where some people have seemed to respond emotionally to a particular topic, and because there's residual fallout and backlash from what has gone on after the Nipsey Hussle homicide, and I'm not going to get into aspects of it that delve in conspiracy, whether conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact. However, what I will talk about that's cropped up more recently here as it relates to that case or that situation is one of the victims. There were three victims in this case, among which being Nipsey Hussle, who was slain, depending on what you believe, but I'm not going to go into that. But there were three victims in this case that were shot, wounded, as reported. One of them, of course, mortally. Another individual who was shot was paralyzed. That person apparently had been recently paroled from prison after spending 20 years there. So that's what I kind of want to get into and discuss. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to tie up some loose ends here. Excuse me. Get myself something to drink and talk about this a little bit in a free flow type of fashion. See who shows up in the chat and might want to expound on this before I go into it. So I'm just going to give it a few more minutes here and tie up some loose ends. I'll be right back with you. cuff here, as I ordinarily will do, going off the cuff. And what I want to do is actually provide some foundation behind what it is I'm speaking of. From an article posted in thefader.com as from yesterday. And the title reads, "The man Nipsey Hussle was buying clothes for during fatal attack has been arrested for associating with the rapper." Just being arrested, being released from prison, Kerry Lathan was shot at Marathon Clothing and then arrested for violating his parole. So that's from thefader.com. And a number of folks in social media apparently have had some misgivings. One of the groups I happen to belong to actually posted something and actually mentioned me by name and tagged me, I guess, for what I'm determining to be a rather provocative comment that I made regarding this thing. But the bottom line is this: the fact is, it's an unfortunate incident, totally unfortunate, right? I'm not here to cast any judgment on anything having to do with this. I'm certainly not responding emotionally to this as I'm looking at the facts, and I want to disclose the facts as I know them to be. Now, in reaction here that I saw in one of the groups I belong to, I'm not going to necessarily quote verbatim what this individual said, but the question arose as to whether or not the arrest was necessary. That the arrest of one of the other victims in this shooting, if that arrest was necessary. Bottom line is, which is quite possibly just about as unfortunate, is this individual was on parole. This individual was not on local probation. They were on state parole. They were paroled from prison after serving 20 years on a murder charge. Think about that for a second. Kerry Lathan had been just released after serving 20 years on murder charges. The taking of a human life. Now, I'm not familiar with the case per se, and I'm sure I'm going to get accused of taking the side of the system or taking the side of the police for this, which would be an emotional response and unfair. But I'm not going by the way that I feel about this situation or from what I've read. Of course, as a disclaimer, I wasn't there. Even though I'm familiar with the geographical location where this happened, I also happen to be familiar with policy and legal statute and procedure dealing with parolees. Now, as it spells out in this social media reaction, one of the stipulations was to avoid spending time with known gang members. And this goes on to say that police say that Nipsey belonged to the Rolling 60s Crips. It says that the police said that. But perusing the interwebs, I'm seeing memes that say, one, for example, that said, that it took a rolling 60s Crip to bring about peace. Something along those lines. It took a gang member, a rolling 60s gang member, to bring about peace and advance peace when the government, members of the government, could not. So within that one particular meme itself, they've identified Nipsey as a active gang member. They identified him as a certified gang member. He's been classified as a gang member. But I won't belabor that point because I don't have the documents in front of me to indicate that, yes, he was an active gang member. I'm just going by what has been known of him from what those of you out there have said. So, this being the case, let me speak slightly hypothetically. This being the case, if Nipsey is classified, was classified on that date as a member of a street gang, and Mr. Lathan was released on parole, and as part of his parole terms, he could not hang, associate, fraternize, interact with members of known street gangs, nor could he be at certain locations where gang members would assemble. And those are facts. Those are facts that are common. They commonly exist within criminal statutes. Those are the terms that are spelled out to those being released on parole. Part of those terms involve not being somewhere you're not supposed to be, or else it's a criminal violation. Now, again, it's unfortunate that this man was paralyzed as a result of this shooting incident. Some are doubting, that it even happened at all. Some are saying that it was totally, totally contrived. But I won't get into that today. I'm not getting into that today. I'm not going to get into that today because, well, there are some suspicions I have about it, and yeah, I won't go into it. I'm going to stick to the point, and the point is that it was shown that someone on parole violated the terms of the parole, and that's why he's in custody. Whether or not there's anything beyond that, yeah, we can feel that there's something behind that. Someone had reacted and said to me, "Man, please, we all know what's really up with this. We think we know what's up with this. We feel we know what's up with this. But unfortunately, we have no proof. We have no proof to substantiate this as fact." What I'd almost be willing to guarantee is this, though. I'd be willing to guarantee that Mr. Lathan signed some paperwork with stipulations attached. And I would say those stipulations probably would say something to the effect that he's not supposed to be with active known members of the Rolling 60s Crip gang, nor be at locations where they are assembled, nor at locations being monitored by the police. Now, you could be out in the general public, from what I understand. You could be in the general public. You know, you can be at some store or something like that, getting something that you need, addressing your needs, whatnot, right? But you can't be at a place that's known to the police to be engaged in criminal enterprise, or a place known for even the potential of criminal activity, because those are terms that are spelled out, stipulated as part of a parole condition. A parole is granted on a conditional basis. And those folks are the facts in this case, as I understand it. So, what I made clear is that all of this is chiefly stemming from a violation of parole terms. Now, I'm not sure if any leniency can be granted. I mean, there have been some cases that I've known of, and I don't have anything that's documented to show you or to convey to you, but from my previous understanding, there are situations that are case by case only. Let's say a death in the family or something like that, or something, that's adverse. And there's some leniency that could be granted. There's some flexibility, but I can't really say that there's a lot of flexibility associated with somebody that has just spent 20 years on a murder charge. Just saying. So, bottom line here is this: a binding contract was violated. The person simply went against the contract. Was there a proviso for leniency in that contract? Don't know. So that's the bottom line here. The bottom line here is you have an individual that was somewhere they weren't supposed to be. And as a consequence of that, they unfortunately were victimized and shot and subsequently paralyzed. So I'm not on the bandwagon to say that, well, they should have never been there. I mean, that fact is stipulated. I mean, that's just apparent, right? But I'm not going to be the one to say that because it's obvious. Rather unfortunate, but it's obvious. Now, just to perhaps better clarify this, is the way I best understand it. I'm going to go over with it again here, and this was my response along this conversation thread here. What I stated clearly was something that was unfortunately factual. And just to clarify, as a given condition of parole, as a parolee, they or you're not typically permitted to be in certain locations or interact among certain people. Quite simply, it's a stipulation. It's not complicated. As I asked the question earlier, rhetorically, is there anything behind it? And we do feel it is. But when you really think about it, we've given them. If you want to blame the system for this, the ammunition was already given to them in this particular instance. The guy signed a contract saying he's not going to be at certain places with certain people. So there's supposed to be some flexibility extended just because he's paralyzed. I mean, I'm just asking the question. And what I already mentioned is that the caveat here in all this is that he was in the company of a known individual and a location probably where he wasn't supposed to be. So, just this momentary instance of, let's just say, inappropriate behavior is what took place here. I'm just calling out the facts. Fact being is that a statute was violated. That's the underlying reason behind this, really, more so than police misconduct or procedural misconduct by the police. It's just not that clear. That's not clear. So, all right, streaming live. I'm still here for a little while longer, and I'm going to see if there's any questions that might pop up that anyone might have here. Been at it here so far for close to a half hour, so I'm going to hang out for a little while longer and see what any one of y'all might have to say in the chat room. Chat room is open, and I'm not set up right now for be playing commercials, but I have some music going in the background for the time being. Let me take a quick break and be right back. All right, I'm back for more. Anyway, I just ran across something called segregated by design. Segregated by design, and there's a short film that comes with that. It was actually it's a short film by me see if I can get the guy's name here. I believe it's Richard Rothstein. Yeah, Richard Rothstein. And he's the author of a book called Color of Law. Yeah, goes into, yeah, he's Color of Law, Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And it was designated he was designated as one of 10 finalists on the National Book Awards long list for the best nonfiction book of 2017. Mr. Rothstein is a distinguished fellow of the Economic Policy Institute, a senior fellow emeritus at the Thurgood Marshall Institute of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and a senior fellow of the Haas Institute at UC Berkeley. So I just got a notification that this came out, and the film is actually online right now and is available today. Education that leads to legislation, segregated by design, examines the forgotten history of how federal, state, and local governments unconstitutionally segregated every major metropolitan area in America through law and policy. Prejudice can be birthed from a lack of understanding the historically accurate details of the past. Without being aware of the constitutional residential policies the Americans, or rather the United States government, enacted during the middle of the 20th century, one might have a negative view of today of neighborhoods where African Americans live, or even of African Americans themselves. We can compensate for this unlawful segregation through a national political consensus that leads to legislation. And this can only happen if the majority of Americans understand how we got here. Like Jay-Z said in a recent New York Times interview, quotes, um, you can't have a solution until you start dealing with the problem. What you reveal, you heal, end quote. This is the major challenge at hand, to educate fellow citizens of the unconstitutional inequality that we've woven, and on behalf of our government, accept responsibility to fix it. So this presentation is online today. It's called Segregated by Design, segregatedbydesign.com. By the way, just to mention, I'm actually an affiliate. I'm going to try to post a link in the description here of this particular presentation today. I am an affiliate of the book, Neely Fuller Jr. book, The United Independent Compensatory Code Service Code System Concept. The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a compensatory counter racist code. I have the actual 2016, the latest revised and expanded edition, and it's a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. So this is basically a code book, a workbook, active workbook that can be employed and put to use. So I'm actually an affiliate member, sales affiliate for those books. Feel free to click on the link, and you can obtain that book for yourself at producejustice.com, producejustice.com. I'm your host here, Bobby Sage, on the basically called the Cogent Talk channel, otherwise known as the Cogentivist Chronicles, which is a blog site. And just here today discussing a topical matter that's emerged on social media, on my social media notification here earlier. Just discussing the recent arrest of one of the victims that was at the Nipsey Hussle shooting in Los Angeles, South Central, in Hyde Park district of Los Angeles, actually, otherwise known as South Los Angeles or South Central Los Angeles. So today, just I touched in on that a little earlier. Just wanted to see if I can get some of you folks involved and see what you might think here as it relates to the topic today. Apparently, there have been some misgivings about the individual being arrested, and his name is Kerry Latham, and he had just finished up a 20-year bid on a murder charge. 20 years. So he's 56. So 20 years ago, yeah, I guess he was found responsible for having committed these murders, and he got released after 20 years. I'm without reviewing the case itself because I don't have that information before me right now. I'm suspecting it was a gang-related murder, probably a gang-related homicide. That would only be the reason that I would suspect he'd be released after 20 years of serving 20 years of time behind the taking of a life. So, um, and, you know, California doesn't have a death penalty. Never has had one. Well, it had one years and years ago, the gas chamber years ago, uh, before my time. But California has always been known to be somewhat of a um, state that's anti-death penalty. So, um, according to what I read in this article that was offered by thefader.com, he had served 20 years behind a homicide. So I'm gonna see while I'm sitting here. I'm trying to see if I can find out more details about about his case. But you know what's really become an odd thing to me over the past couple weeks now since the slaying of Nipsey Hussle is that all this came through TMZ. You know, the video and the when the news broke, it came out. It emerged from TMZ, which isn't anything necessarily abnormal because it happened on a Sunday. It happened during the afternoon, and mainstream news outlets aren't necessarily that available or in position to report the news, especially as it breaks like that. They're not as well equipped to do that versus internet generated um, news properties, if you will, or in this case, I don't know what TMZ would be considered, pop news or gossip news or whatnot, but I did kind of find it somewhat odd for them to be breaking this type of news like they did. But, they did. I, I, I'm holding back from, I'm reserving any comment about this being, because this whole incident being something totally contrived, that being the entire incident incident itself. I do have my suspicions about it being, well, being a hoax. Um, Bottom line is, I don't. No one knows what happened except those who were directly involved, or if there's any, um, any hoax to be gleaned from it. If there's anything um, that's illegitimate about it, that it was contrived. The only people that know about it are those that are complicit into bringing this about. I mean, there have been other presenters here, stream as recent as yesterday, questioning whether or not it was real or fake, and that's just a whole other rabbit hole that I don't know if I'm equipped to actually head down or what. Um, but needless to say, it is interesting and it's somewhat a bit distressing, right? Um, as I'm kind of scrolling through here, and then along the other podcasters and such and other people that post up content, I'm reading. I'm careful not to read into it or read beyond it, but at the same time, I don't want to accept a given narrative either. And it can be tough because you're trying to gather the facts, and of course, we cannot gather our own facts. I guess we can. I mean, if the facts are irrefutable, and you can't deny these facts, the facts that you find out and that are presented, then what you might even have is the truth. But I guess the question always remains that is it your truth? Just ran across something here that something interesting. Apparently, a lawyer goes off after Nipsey Hussle's homie gets arrested, and that was as of 3 hours ago. So I want to see what this lawyer's got to say. Somebody that's actually in the legal profession, see what they could, if they could weigh in on this for a second. Hold on, let me see if I can get it.
Hey,
Well, that's not.
before we start this video, turn on them post notifications if you really gang. Banging this thing, let's get to it. Thoughts on this first,
Let me skip
man.
up a
It
little bit.
happened with Nip for probation violation. Cause right now, man, cause you know.
All right, first of all, right off the top, it wasn't a probation violation. It was a parole violation. There's a difference. Difference being is, and it's also in print right here on this individual's YouTube page here. It says that their friend was arrested for a probation violation, but that's inaccurate. That's inaccurate. The individual that we're speaking of that spoke on earlier was on parole, apparently reportedly on parole. There's a difference between parole and probation. Probation is on the county level. Parole is on the state level. That's the difference. On the local level, local or county level, you serve time in a county jail for the maximum time of no more than a year. For any offense beyond a year or beyond that, typically you will serve prison time for. Hence, from a prison institution, from a state institution, you are granted parole if you meet the criteria and serve your time. Whereas with probation, it could be summary probation or formal, summary, informal, or formal probation, where you actually have to report to a representative of the county, that being a probation officer. In the case of parole, however, you don't have summary parole, right? When you parole out, especially on, depending on the nature of the offense, in this case being murder, you're released on parole and have to report to a parole officer that is assigned to your case. And they monitor your actions or your inactions to satisfy what's stipulated on the contract that you sign as a parolee at large. So that's how it works. I'm not gonna even bother playing this because it's only a couple minutes. Let me play this.
People said the LAPD kind of betrayed him a little bit because they was saying how good he was to the community and how he helped out everybody, and y'all turn around and arrest his homie. So Nori the Nightmare, she ain't like that. So she say she.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the local police have to come and get you. See, the thing is, if it's discovered through investigation that as a person on parole, and it's discovered during an ensuing investigation that you were there, you violated that parole, they can come scoop you up later. And it's not necessarily the police that's going to do it. It's not necessarily on the local level. State parole agent can come by and pick you up with the assistance of the local police, but it could be your parole officer because you're assigned to a case agent, and that case agent will come by and scoop you up, either by themselves or with the assistance and or the knowledge of the local law enforcement. So that's not uncommon at all. But they're saying that the LA, see again, we're getting into this emotional thing about this as opposed to it to going by the facts in this thing. And again, I don't have every single fact and every single mode that they took before me right now. I just know from having experienced this myself from a particular standpoint that there's a certain protocol involved. And if you are a parolee, you have to satisfy certain criteria.
She gonna take on a case pro bono, man. I gotta say salute to her, man. That's real. But I will let
All right,
y'all watch the
Lori,
video.
who's
And make sure y'all follow me on Instagram at King Cassius 2020 because you ain't really gang if you not. And if you want me to follow you back, go ahead and send me a DM. Let me know your notification gang, and I'm gonna go ahead and
yeah, I'm gonna
add
be
you.
doing
All
that.
right.
What up, y'all? I just want to say thank you so much for just to everybody that shared the post.
Apparently, Nori the Nightmare is this person's name. This attorney, I guess. Nori the Nightmare.
I was able to get in touch with Carrie's family. I'm like a lot of you. I'm broken. I mean, how's the LAPD gonna sit here and sing Nipsey's praises and then arrest somebody for being associated with him? Like, it's not gonna happen on my watch. I'm gonna take care of it on LA. Believe that. And once we get Carrie out, we're gonna lace him with some fly clothes. We're gonna set him up with a job, and we're gonna finish what Nipsey started, not just with Carrie, but with LA. So believe that.
A B.
All right, here we go. So, well, that's good. I mean, that's well and fine if she's able to enable this to lead to a path of justice for Mr. Latham. I mean, if there's anything that went wrong procedurally with this, beyond just emotion, and granted, I am not an attorney, to make that abundantly clear. Apparently, this individual is. She's an attorney, I guess. I don't know if she's been retained by Mr. Latham or not. But I'm conveying to you what I think or how I think this works. A case agent or a parole officer that is assigned a set of cases, or any parole agent that comes across the knowledge of a parolee at large who is committing a violation, can make arrangements to go after that individual. It's just that simple. And maybe in in certain situations, depending on the parameters or depending on the variables that might be involved, they may be able to be lenient with the guy. Who knows? But from what this individual is saying, she's hanging this all on LAPD, and she's appealing to the emotion of the public behind this, which is I don't think it's fair. When the fact is there was a violation of procedure, and that procedure falls on the shoulders of the parolee. It's really quite simple. You're supposed to follow specific terms and conditions that are set before you and stipulated. And if you don't follow those terms, then you run the risk of violating it. And you run the risk of having to be brought back into custody. It's quite simple. All right, going to take another break here and see what else I can talk about. See who else who might be in the chat today. Be right back.